Hey guys, Brent Hull talking about houses and how to fix them and the history of them. Last time I showed you the history of home building, where houses came from 1750 up to the World War II. Today we're going to talk about kind of that period, probably after 1960, after the ranch period, and kind of how houses get better. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about kind of houses like this, right? Just houses that are a mess, that have no architectural style, that really are so functional because you've got that huge garage on the side. See these different houses and kind of how they're throwing them together. They're random. Realize that that this house has details in here that are just kind of weird, right? Because of the way the brick is and the way they've got this corner turned, that banding in the bottom there, that doesn't show well, right? It doesn't look very good. Now, I think there's a number of solutions for this design today, and I want to push builders back to that stuff. And the first thing is nostalgia, okay? The first solution to the problem is that we don't look back to the past enough. And for some reason, we've taken on, what modern architects abhor, that you would ever repeat and do something, even though we're doing it all the time. And you have to be original. And I would argue that for production building, you don't have to be original. You just have to be good. This is a warehouse or four-square building service. This was 50s and 60s. And these are house plans, okay, that are organized by 7-room, 6-room, 5-room, farm suburban houses, garden houses, GI homes, right? So that would have been for the GIs coming home. And these are a little bit ranchy, okay? But they're not all ranchy. There's some colonial revival things in here that aren't too bad. And so what seems obvious to me is I'd much rather buy that house, okay, than buy some of these other houses that are being built. I'd much rather look at some of this mid-century modern thing and we could go right back to it. It doesn't seem too far a leap for me that the cost on this thing, I mean, there's no brick on there. You got a brick chimney. It's mostly siding. This isn't an expensive house, yet the styling is nostalgic. Now you could do the same thing. Like I wouldn't recommend a Victorian neighborhood, right? It's just going to be too expensive, too quirky. The market's probably too small. But for the mid-century modern, I mean, the nostalgia thing was already played up a little bit with the arts and crafts, right? The bungalows that were rehashed. I did a whole video on tapered columns because that arts and crafts had been revamped a couple times. But there is opportunity for nostalgia when we're building. There's nothing wrong with building this over and over again. Why? Because people love it, because people remember it. It's like if you had to listen to a radio station and they only played new songs, okay? You might find a few good songs that you like, okay? But if they're only playing new hip songs, right? Or disco or whatever they're playing, it's going to be like I gotta hear, the Eagles. I gotta hear Boston. I gotta hear Cheap Trick. I gotta hear some of these songs again. I gotta hear great country songs. I want to hear Johnny Cash, right? I'm going back to these oldies that remind us of a time that we loved. And so nostalgia, I want to encourage, is a great solution for this housing crisis because we've already designed it. We've already built it. We've already done it. And so you as a builder, production builder, are going to have a much better time, easier time encouraging people to think back than you are trying to invent something new, especially when it's ugly. As you think about large developments, okay, there was a development called the TNDs, Traditional Neighborhood Developments. That was a little bit about nostalgia. It started at Seaside. I've talked about that in some of my other videos. So nostalgia is such a great solution. I don't know why it's not being used more. Now, when we get into this house, so what I've done is I've taken this house, okay, and I've worked up two options. One's kind of a Leave It to Beaver option, and one's kind of an English option, okay? If we just look at this composition, well, let me just talk about a big picture. Basically, the average lot size in America is like 50 by 80, 50 by 100, something like that. It's 50 feet wide, okay? So if I've got a 50-foot wide lot, 5-foot setback on either side, I've got a 20-foot house, okay? And a 20-foot facade, okay? And if I look at that as the whole neighborhood and this is my whole lot, we're putting our house, say, right here in your backyard and everything else, As a developer, okay, it is much cheaper for me to build these houses like this in a grid, okay? If I don't have to put a driveway back here, an alley back here, and I don't have to pour concrete back to the house, and all I have to do is pour concrete here, I'm saving a lot of money, okay? So remember that when we're thinking about production building, we're saving pennies and pennies. If you've ever seen those houses in new developments where it's brick and then it breaks down and you have this block where there's siding, that is a cost saver. That's a penny pincher, a bean counter who basically said, you know, if I cut out 20% of the brick in the house, we'd save, you know, we build 1,000 houses a year, we build 10,000 houses a year. That saves us $25 million. And so they're doing this kind of math. I'm just telling you that they sat around and said, look, if we didn't do alleys and rear garages, we would save millions of dollars. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Put the garage up front? I can imagine this first conversation when some guy pitches the idea. What are you going to do? Put the garages up? People won't stand for that. Yeah, they will. No, they won't. We ought to try it. Okay. And so they go, well, you know, that's going to save them money. So we end up with houses with these huge 2-car garages and the door sunk way back in the back. And all of a sudden, culturally, okay, beautifully, we've got a functional solution that's ugly. Okay. And these houses are sometimes called snout nose houses because that garage kicks out like a pig's nose, okay, or a pig's snout. And so realize that the way we got here was a penny pinching, got to save money kind of attitude. Even if this lot was wider, let's say it was 60 wide, then I could put my house here and I could come in the side, right? But on a 50-foot lot, I can't do that. And so the front of my house is what it is, and it's kind of ugly. Now, the other thing is just mathematically, what happens here, and you'll see it in this house, is I need 18 feet, 20 feet for my garage. So now I've got a 40-foot house, right? And half of it is in the garage. Okay, so the reason why this is so garage heavy, okay, is because it's taken up half the house and it's kicked forward about 4 or 5 feet, maybe 8 feet. And so this is a snout nose house. Now, how do we fix this? Okay, I don't like things like this brick band here that isn't at a pedestal height. You'll notice that, you know, I'm always talking about the classical proportions. What if we built this house with classical proportions? What would happen then? What a good idea. Okay, so we'll explore some of that. What if I didn't frame my dormers so that they're ugly, right? So that I got these big sombreros on top of this dormer. I think I could build this house better, okay? Even if I took the exact same thing and did it, I would just de-emphasize some materials. And remember in Texas is a big brick market. So that's the reason why you see brick on the face of this thing. I guarantee going back on the sides, it's mostly siding, okay? And so this is a perceived value that people think they have to have in this market in order to sell. I would argue it doesn't, but needless to say, we're going to try to fix this house. Now, the first kind of run I took at it was taking the leave it to beaver approach. Leave it to beaver approach is, you know, de-emphasizing that big gable end over the garage, putting a shed roof over top of that, and making a handsome door here, okay? Making something that is more inviting. When you have a paneled door, block door that you can't see through, it's not as inviting. I've also taken the windows out, and to save money, look at me, saving money, I have not put in those fake double hungs or the fake casement. I'm just going to put a sheet of glass in there because I think I could give this a nostalgic turn, something that hints to the 1940s, 1950s, hints to the picture window, which goes back to the 1920s of all times. And so there's historic precedent that I can play with in here that gives this house kind of a little bit more charm. Now realize you don't need a dormer up there, but if I'm going to do a dormer, I'm going to do a shed dormer here, something simple, because the idea I want to convey in here is that this house is simple, it's clean, it's nostalgic. And so we don't need all these fancy, heavy sombreroed roofs and crazy dormers and everything in order for this to look good. I've got simple columns on the front, and then I've got a low band at the pedestal height of stone. It could be stone, it could be rubble stone, it could be brick, it could be something in here. And notice what I've done with the garages is I've taken them and made them kind of that carriage style garage. So this house, if you just look at this is way too strong. That element is too heavy. It's foreboding, right? And so this design, softens that and makes it much more inviting, much more something that you'd want to go visit. And what am I doing? I've taken the garage doors and I've taken those panels away and I've put light inside the garage doors so that they're less imposing. I know that these doors can be made fairly cheaply, okay? And so this isn't a huge expense. I've taken brick off, I've saved money, I've changed the window styles, I've saved money, I've just switched it to a different type of door, no change in money. I've got less brick, I'm gonna maybe spend a little bit money on this stone. There is gonna have to be training that's gonna have to take place for some of these trades and some of these things to learn how to do some of this stuff. I mean, heck, the way that they're doing peel and stick stone today on these houses, most builders are probably going to opt for that. At least you have a semblance of something that was historic. But this is a much simpler way of solving that house, and I think more inviting. The other approach would be to take a kind of an English approach, right? Where instead of having that big gable end over the garage, I've again softened the garage, softened the snout, okay? I've softened that thing coming out, and I've done the gable end on this side, okay? And by doing that, I can do some fun stuff with timbering in the gable end and play around with this. Then if I do stucco here, stone below, and then kind of an English style door, I've got the diamond lights over one on this window. Again, playing around with the dollars, I don't think that's a lot of extra money to do those things, but simplify the garage door. I've still given it a cottage look. So we're going after, small houses are cottages. Small houses don't have to be McMansions. And so we can do cottagey things in this house and it can be successful. So I've got cottage style doors, I've got light in there so it's not an imposing wall that sticks out in front of you. I've gone with a plank door in here. Someone could put strap hinges on it if they want. I don't think that's a lot of money, but that conveys this story really well. Stucco in here if we can, stone below if we can, and then the diamond panes and the timbers in the eave make this house something that has a story, okay? So I've played around with this, right? And I've just changed the materials so that it's more beautiful from the street, right? And whether it's beautiful like the Pantheon or the Parthenon, right? Or whether it's just more beautiful than what it was, I'd like us to just, push towards more beautiful instead of the ugly that is so many of our neighborhoods, that we have the opportunity to tweak just a few details. You see, I've made, 2 or 3 tweaks here, and I think our house is much better. Our house is more interesting, and it has a story. It has a narrative, something that you could carry into the rest of the house. So how do we fix our houses today? How do we fix these production builder houses? There has to be a designer involved, okay? Builders, put your pride away, okay? Just because it sells doesn't mean it's well designed. There's opportunity for you guys. Everybody knows that the iPod, when it first came out, was the same thing as the Walkman, but it was designed better. It was designed cooler. It was so much more hip. Everybody wanted to use it. They wanted to touch it. If we build things that are beautiful, you can charge more money. Do you hear me? You can make more money because you can charge more for that, and it's not going to cost you that much more, if any, to build it that way. So nostalgia is at least one solution for coming back to and getting better looking houses in our houses today. I'm Brent Hull. Let me know what you guys think.